Okay, welcome back. So we're going to finish talking about Harry Potter, and we're going to also look at some of the other major concepts here. Um, J.K. Rowling has borrowed quite a bit from fairy tale genre motifs, and so I want to discuss that with you, as well as race and social class and vision. And so I think that there's quite a bit here that we can delve into. I'm going to also be referring to the text, and you know that we finished reading chapters 13 through 17 this week. And I actually wanted to start with Quirrell. So I really don't want to give too many spoilers here because I know that some of you may still be reading and finishing up the book. But once you do, or if you have already, I want to look at page 227 at the very end of chapter 13. And so they finally figured out the mystery with Nicholas Flamel, with Quirrell, and they think that they figured Snape out pretty well. But the reality is that J.K. Rowling has done an excellent job of misleading us constantly about Professor Snape. And what we have to really understand here is that Professor Snape is not a bad guy. He's not a likable guy, but he's not a bad character. He's not an evil character. Um, but he does give Harry a very hard time. Now, I have a few theories as to why that is. I think he gives Harry a hard time because he wants him to learn. I really think that he is not going to be this, there are different types of teachers, and Professor Snape is not that kind of teacher that's going to coddle you or hold your hand or like be really encouraging. He's going to challenge you, he's going to make you work for it because Professor Snape knows that the fate of all of their world lies in Harry's hands and that this is something that a 10-year-old kid needs to start taking seriously. He doesn't want him to think like Malfoy, that he can just do whatever he wants and he can skate by on his name and because he's famous and this and that. Snape knows that in actuality, if he has any chance whatsoever of beating Voldemort, he's going to have to bring it. And Snape is there to train him on that. So, but they really think that Snape is bad. And this is on page 227. I mean, we're in chapter 13 and they still don't really know who Snape truly is. And they're thinking that Professor Quirrell needs to be defended, which is laughable. And so at the end of page 227, they finally think that they figured out the mystery. So we're right, it is the Sorcerer's Stone, and Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments, probably, and Quirrell would have done some anti-dark art spell that Snape needs to break through. So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape? Said Hermione in alarm. It'll be gone by next Tuesday, said Ron. Okay, so we end on kind of a little joke there. But that just goes to show what they really think about Quirrell. At the beginning of chapter 14, they said Quirrell must have been braver than they thought. In the weeks that followed, he seemed to get thinner and paler, but he didn't look as though he'd cracked yet. Whenever Harry passed Quirrell these days, he gave him an encouraging sort of smile. And Ron had started telling people off for laughing at Quirrell's stutter. Okay, so they think that they're coming to Quirrell's defense because Quirrell is being worn down, but he's still being a good guy, and he's one of the good ones. And Snape is the one that they need to keep their eye on. Now, I love these little nuances that kind of happen in the book. If you look on page 233, near the bottom, we see that Hagrid has a dragon's egg, okay? And he won a dragon's egg in a card game. And he got out of the library a book that's called Dragon Breeding for Pleasure and Profit, okay? And he says, okay, guys, keep the egg in the fire because their mothers breathe on them and see when it hatches, they feed it on a bucket of brandy mixed with chicken blood every half an hour. And see here how to recognize different eggs? What I got there's a Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare then. And he looked very pleased with himself, but Hermione didn't. Hagrid, you live in a wooden house, she said. But Hagrid wasn't listening. He was humming merrily as he stoked the fire. So why do we get this detail? Why do we get this little sub-story happening underneath the radar of this bigger plot that's unfolding. And I think the reason is because with this egg, something is about to hatch. See what I did there? Yeah. So I really think that that's what J.K. Rowling was doing with this. It's kind of foreshadowing that something dire is afoot and that it's not going to be pretty, right? It's going to kind of spiral out of control. Now, chapter 15. Now, as you may have guessed, other than the mirror chapter, this is probably my other favorite chapter, the Forbidden Forest, because this is where stuff starts to go down. We really start to see them take the steps that they need to take in order to become the heroes that they're going to become, especially Harry. They go into the Forbidden Forest. Oh my goodness, could this be any more perfect? You know that the forest is a place that you go that's dark, mysterious, uncertain, dangerous, and now they're venturing into the forest in the very first book in the installation of the series in order to learn some information that they're going to need to know in order to move forward. So they're going to come into the forest one way and they're going to leave another way. They follow Quirrell out into the forest. Now, of course, it's called the Forbidden Forest, which makes it that much better that they've entered the forest because they're not supposed to be there. And on page 251, we're told the forest was black and silent. A little way into it, they reached a fork in the earth path, and Harry, Hermione, and Hagrid took the left path, while Malfoy, Neville, and Fang took the right. Okay, now there's something to be said here for taking the right path and the left path. Okay, so she's doing a little play on words here. Our heroes take the path where we know the action is going to unfold. The other people take the, quote, right path, right? The right path, in other words, the safe path. They're looking for unicorns because they've seen that somebody, and this is a punishment, right, for them, for the kids, but they've seen that somebody has killed a unicorn, and that in this world is just, it's a heinous act. Malfoy, of course, uses his social status to try to contest this punishment. And he says, this is servant stuff. It's not for students to do. I thought we'd be copying lines or something. If my father knew I was doing this, he'd, right? And so he starts and then Hagrid, he interrupts him and he says, he would tell you that's how it is at Hogwarts, right? It's kind of like in anything goes, they set the law there. And so we get a little bit of social status interjected there. And we get that from Malfoy. He's kind of like the voice of that, and he kind of reminds us of that constantly. It's constantly on Malfoy's mind. He thinks that he's better than Hagrid and, most other people at Hogwarts. So now they've got to find the culprit who has killed this unicorn, and then they're thinking that they're going to kill it as well. I won't give you all the spoilers here, but I will give you a little Red Riding Hood fairy tale moment on page 254 in chapter 15. Hagrid says, you two wait here, stay on the path, and I'll come back for you. So you know good and well, you know as well as I do, that a true hero will never stay on the path. You have to go off the path, right? Because that's where the action is. And that's how heroes are made. And so they end up confronting what it is that they need to see in order to know what to do. On 258, Firenze tells them, that is because it is a monstrous thing to slay a unicorn. Only one who has nothing to lose and everything to gain would commit such a crime. The blood of a unicorn will keep you alive, even if you are an inch from death, but at a terrible price. You've slain something pure and defenseless to save yourself, and you will have but a half-life, a cursed life, from the moment the blood touches your lips. Harry stared back at Firenze's head. But who'd be that desperate? He wondered aloud. If you're going to be cursed forever, Death's better, isn't it? It is, Ferenz agreed, unless all you need to stay alive long enough is to drink something else, something that will bring you back to full strength and power, something that will mean you can never die. Mr. Potter, do you know what is hidden in the school at this very moment? The Sorcerer's Stone, of course. But I don't understand who. Can you think of nobody who has waited many years to return to power, who has clung to life, awaiting their chance? Do you mean that was full? Right? And he's going to say Voldemort. So he learns the truth, and he learns the truth essentially by himself as he wanders off. And this is perfect, right? Because we know that in the end, Harry is going to have to take the journey on his own. His friends, Ron and Hermione, are also heroes, but they can only take him so far. Harry is the true hero of this series. They still think that Snape is behind this, by the way. They still think that Snape is behind this, that he's the one helping Voldemort, so that Voldemort can regain power and Snape will be rich. Okay, so we've got a few different themes coming in here with fairy tale genre motifs. Okay, so the genre of fairy tales uses several motifs. You're familiar with them. The forest is one of them. Emphasis on transformation is yet another one of them. This is really important because we still don't know who Quirrell is yet. We still haven't seen him yet. I mean, J.K. Rowling is really building this up. She's misleading us on purpose so that we'll be surprised in the end who Quirrell really is and who he's working for. We also see the outcast child as a hero here. It's always the outcast that ends up being the one to save the day. We see this in Aladdin. We see this in almost every tale that there is. We see this in The Beauty and the Beast. We see this in, because the Beast is right the one who's outcast, and he ends up being the one that is meant for Belle to marry. We see this in Cinderella, right? So there's just every tale that you think of. There's going to be an outcast. Hansel and Gretel were outcast from their own home, and then they ended up being the ones to save their parents. We also see the eternal battle between good and evil, and this is something that stories are just based on. There always has to be something in the way, but it helps when that something in the way is something that you have to confront for the sake of your own morality. So the battle between good and evil, we see that very clearly here with Harry and Voldemort, and then we also are thinking that it's Snape, but it's not really Snape. We also see another genre motif here in a dead mother, right? We know that Harry's protected by his dead mother. In Cinderella, her dead mother protects her. That's what her fairy godmother steps in as the mother role for her. An absent mother, a dead mother, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, all of these tales have a mother that is absent and yet somehow present. And so we're going to see that in Harry Potter with each installation in the series. And then we get something that you may not have expected in middle grade, but characters like giants, elves, ghosts, dragons, unicorns, centaurs, all of these mythological characters all kind of come together in this one series, which is really great, right? Because we have a familiarity with all these other things. So this really helps it helps the book and the series to establish its relevance. It also makes it feel very real because there are a lot of people that we've heard of from other mythologies that are now in this book. So that's fairy tale motifs in this series. I'm going to keep going, and in the next video we'll cover race and social class and vision, and that's really a big deal here. I've got one more little fairy tale thing for you here because we get a Snow White moment. Now remember, Hagrid has that dragon's egg, and on page 265 they ask him, that night you won Norbert, which is the dragon. What stranger did you say you were playing cards with? What did he look like? I don't know. He wouldn't take his cloak off. And that gives you like a Snow White witch kind of temptation with the apple. The egg was Hagrid's temptation, and he took it.